all kind of an experiment. But hi and welcome. I'm Jim Madden. I'm one of the leaders of Mountain Time Arts. And tonight, together, we're going to launch the 5th season of Mountain Time Arts events. So time flies, I guess. And we're undoubtedly attending the first ever virtual campfire in historic Bogart Park.
All right.
So that's a first amongst a lot of firsts, I imagine, in this interesting time we're in, a lot of virtual firsts. Also here in Bogart Park, we have the privilege of being next to this restored section of the creek that was completed about 3 years ago. And a number of people on this call had a role in making that happen. And we're also under the new full moon, the flower moon this month. So it's surely a season of all sorts of virtual events, and all of Mountain Time Arts events in the past 4 years have been large gatherings outdoors. So here goes, we're all in this experiment together. And in the face of health and economic crises, we are strikingly recognizing our interdependence with each other. And for Mountain Time Arts, we've just begun a new initiative that we're calling Seebozemancreek that just started shortly before the pandemic arrived here. And at the invitation of the Downtown Bozeman Partnership, we will be implementing the power of art to catalyze the community to recognize the creek that is right underneath our feet and underneath the streets, and in some cases underneath the buildings as it runs through downtown. And will catalyze the community to engage and develop political will, community will, to revitalize the creek and become the resource and amazing asset that we can all be proud of. So that's our vision and goal for Seebozemancreek. And before we light the fire and break out the drinks and s'mores, I'd like to go over a few Zoom basics. We're probably all overly familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case. On the lower left side of your screen, there's a button for a tab for muting and unmuting yourself, and as well as starting and stopping the video. On the upper right part, there's a icon that looks like a grid thing where you can switch back and forth between gallery view, which has a Hollywood Squares kind of thing, and speaker view. So you can experiment with that and see what you like. We'll be recording this, so just for your info, we'll be recording this. Then in the middle of the bottom screen, there's an icon that says chat, and that opens what's called the chat room on the right. And you can put in comments or questions as we go along, and there'll be an opportunity at the end where we can have some discussion and look at any questions that come up. And so Jamie will be organizing those as we go along, so feel free to make comments in there. Then at that time, if you wish to speak, if you would just announce your name and make sure you're unmuted, and then when you're finished speaking, if you would just make some acknowledgement of that, say that you're finished or done, so that we know that you're done and we're not interrupting each other. So now let's gather around the fire. As people have been doing for eons, gathering in a circle around a fire, for centuries in this valley, gathering around campfires, and maybe even in this same spot. The coals are glowing. There's a fresh trout perhaps sizzling in a cast iron pan. Nestled in the coals, at the edge of the coals, is a Dutch oven with dessert. And so find a comfortable place to sit, maybe on a log, maybe on the ground, or in a crazy creek chair. And if you're comfortable to do so, close your eyes and recall a memorable campsite and campfire. Perhaps along a stream with the sounds of rushing water and the pine pitch, the crackling flames with the red coals turning white at the edges as they reach their peak. And the wood smoke, the smell of the smoke. So taking in the sounds and the smells. Maybe the kids are jumping out of their skins, begging for s'mores. And maybe it's after a camp meal and the stories are starting to roll. Maybe some tall tales, some ghost stories. Some are new. Some you've heard scores of times. And the full moon is just rising in the east through the trees. And who do we have here approaching from the shadows? But Mountain Time Arts board member, guide, and master storyteller, Dalton Brink, who will take over from here.
So thank you, Jen. It's so good to be here with you all at Bozeman Creek. As you can see, it's a beautiful night. The weather is agreeing with us now that it got over its fit earlier today. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I see some familiar faces, Jessica and Josh, and I'm just so glad to be able to see you guys. It's been a while. We've all been locked up in the house for a long time, but luckily we live in a place where beauty is all around us and nature, and Bozeman Creek is a big part of that, especially for me. I take my daughter walking along it as much as I can, especially during this time, and watching the wildflowers pop up here and there and people's gardens come to life. And so we're just really glad to have you here. Again, my name is Dalton Brink. I'm a board member of Mountain Time Arts. And we have a really great little lineup for you tonight. We have storytelling and song and music, some history about where we live, all too forgotten sometimes, and it's a great opportunity to reflect on who came before us and how they used the land, and how we can continue to use the land in a way that protects the land and that gratifies our souls at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first performer tonight. We're really lucky to have her. Florence Doyle is a member of the Crow and Apsalaga tribe and a student at Bozeman High School. She's performed in several Mountain Time Arts projects, including Cherry River and Stand by Snow, and the Indigenous Women Banner Project by Adam Sings in the Timber. So if you'll listen up and maybe even close your eyes and take in her words and her voice, and join me in welcoming Florence singing The Sound of Many Waters.
Hello everyone, my name is Florence Doyle. I have had the wonderful privilege of working with Mountain Time Arts on several of their projects now, as Dalton just told you. And I have been really honored to be a part of their wonderful mission of bringing really the story of the importance of water in our community and to everyone in our community. And they always make it a priority to value Native voices. And as a member of the Crow Nation, I really appreciate that. But tonight, in a twist, I am going to be bringing you a song from a different part of my heritage. I'm going to be singing a song called Arana Farga, which is Irish for Song of the Sea. So I hope you enjoy it. And let me just get my music going here, and we will jump right in. right, and that is what I have for you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of the donors for your support of this wonderful, wonderful organization, and thank you for having me, and save the whales. Yay, okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Florence. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing with us. What made you pick that song in particular?
You know, I wanted the water theme, and I figured the ocean. There's a body of water, so
yeah.
yeah.
That was great. Well, thank you so much. I could hear the water, Bozeman Creek behind me joining in with the chorus of your song. It was really great. Yeah. Well, guys, we have a poll that we put out that Jamie, I think, is going to tell us a little bit about your answers, about what drink you have tonight. I myself have an old fashioned.
You get to order.
There's something good. There's some wine. We got some spirits. Looks like the spirits are high tonight. That's good.
What are you gonna have?
Are the results gonna be published, like as for each person?
Yeah. I don't know.
You should say no.
No. Well, I hope the spirits are doing you all good as they're doing me. I hope that it helps make your sleep a little clearer tonight.
Yeah.
Up next, we're going to jump right into our next guest. It's a virtual guest. It comes in the form of a presentation. This is from Craig Woolard. He's been the civil engineering department head and the professor for MSU since October of 2018, and he previously served as the director of public works for Bozeman, which gives him a unique view and perspective on our water. And this presentation is going to be titled Bozeman's Water, Past, Present, and Future.
A little bit about what makes our town work.
Yeah.
So Steve, if you would. So in the West, water has always been the key to our economy and the vitality of our communities. And every great Western city has a story surrounding water. And tonight I want to share Bozeman's water story and make a few comments about the challenges and opportunities we face at this unique moment in history. You know, Bozeman was booming at the turn of the century, and its population nearly doubled from 1900 to 1910. New industries such as pea canneries, the Lurkine Brewery, and the Story Milling Company brought new people to town, and those people demanded the public health benefits and convenience of a public water system. Bozeman's original water source was Lyman Creek, which is located in the Bridger Range north of town. And as our community grew, the city made improvements to its system by adding additional storage and replacing the original wooden pipe with cast iron pipe that's still in use today. But despite those improvements, the Lyman supply simply couldn't keep up with demand. So enter Bozeman's city engineer, Mr. L.S. Thorpe, and his hat, who sought to solve this problem by developing additional water supplies south of town. Thorpe identified a number of options in his studies, but ultimately decided on water from Sourdough Creek, also known as Bozeman Creek, as the source of supply for the growing community. Development of that Sourdough Creek supply required the construction of the Mystic Lake Dam in the 1920s, and that dam served the residents of Bozeman for many years until it was breached or removed in 1984 for safety reasons. But water from Sourdough Creek is still an important supply today. Bozeman's final water source was the development of the highlight drainage during the Depression era. Use of Highlight Creek for agricultural irrigation dates back into the 1870s, but it was the growth of Bozeman's municipal needs, along with that agricultural supply, that really drove the final construction of Highlight Reservoir for a cost of about $350,000. 2 transmission lines now carry water from Highlight and Bozeman Creek to Bozeman's new award-winning water treatment facility located at the mouth of Sourdough Canyon. There, we treat water to meet all safe drinking water regulations and distribute it to town. A much simpler treatment system also exists at Lyman Creek. Those 3 water supply projects, Lyman Creek in the 1890s, Bozeman Creek in the 1920s, and the completion of Highlight Reservoir shortly after the war have provided for the growth of Bozeman for all these years. And I'm fascinated between the parallels of those times and today. In the early 1900s, our civic leaders and citizens made investments in developing water sources that served not only the needs of the day, but also generations that followed. And when you consider that our original water source has been supplying Bozeman with water for nearly 120 years, you can't help but admire the vision, the courage, and the investments made by those who came before us. So now let's look where we are today. First, let's talk about how we measure water supply. We measure it in acre feet. So if you covered the playing field of Bobcat Stadium with 1 foot of water from goal line to goal line, that's an acre foot. It's about 326,000 gallons. Today, our existing water sources provide an average of 17 acre feet of water per day to Bozeman. 40% comes from Highlight, 40% from Bozeman Creek, and the remaining 20% from Lyman. Today, we have plenty of water. But like Bozeman's founders, we need to look to the future and predict what our needs will be. This graph shows what the future may look like. The blue line forecasts our available water resources, and the red line projects our future water demand. If we continue to use water as we are today, and we continue growing as we are today, we will develop a water gap, or a situation where demand exceeds supply. And when we have a gap, we run the risk of running out of water. Bozeman's Integrated Water Resource Plan is our strategy for providing water for the next 50 years. Dozens of supply alternatives were identified during the IWRP process, and we have a two-part strategy. We'll conserve water through conservation and develop new sources of supply. Conservation is really about how we use water, and most of the year, water is used primarily for drinking, washing clothes, taking showers, flushing toilets. But use goes way up in the summer months because of outdoor irrigation for lawns and gardens. And in fact, 50% of our overall water use occurs just during the summer months. Water conservation can reduce water demand and delay the water gap. We've implemented rebates for water-efficient toilets and clothes washers and provided water-efficient shower heads. Our irrigation programs educate and provide rebates so you can keep your lawn and garden green and healthy with a fraction of the water you use today. And those efforts are paying off. Since establishing Montana's first and only water conservation program just 2 years ago, you, the citizens of Bozeman, have reduced demand by over 8 million gallons a year. Conserving water is the right thing to do, and saving water is much less expensive than developing new sources of supply. The second strategic element of the IWRP is to develop additional sources of supply. We'll start by expanding the water we get from Lyman Creek and Highlight reservoirs. It is the easiest water for Bozeman to use because we have the pipes and treatment plants in place to use it already. And we're looking at ways to increase storage in Bozeman Creek. But rather than build a dam as was done in the past, we're identifying ways to improve natural storage. By developing small ponds and improving the stream bank, we can create water storage that we can use in periods of high demand and improve the watershed in the process. Our final source will be groundwater, which is subsurface water accessed through wells. It's a critical option for Bozeman. Groundwater is resilient to drought, it's resistant to wildfire, and it requires much less treatment than surface water sources from lakes or rivers. It will be a challenge to locate the well fields and develop the legal underpinnings for being able to use the water. So what can you do to help? I think you can start by recognizing the accomplishments of Bozeman's founders. They were significant and we've benefited from them for years. You can appreciate our municipal watersheds. They have been and will continue to be a key to success as our community. And you can respect the resource by using water wisely, both indoors and out, and be willing to make the investments in our water system that future generations will need to prosper. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie, for presenting us with that. It's always mind-blowing to me when I hear the statistics of the water and how it's being used here in Bozeman and the valley. Did you hear what it said that the reservoir, Highlight Reservoir, was a $350,000 project? Like, you can't get a one-bedroom bungalow on the northeast side for that nowadays. and they built a whole reservoir. It's pretty incredible.
Howling is starting.
Oh, is it? We've been having for the healthcare workers, so I hope you guys join us at 8 o'clock. My wife's a nurse, so she's just gonna wonder what I'm doing upstairs. I mean, by the creek.
For those of you that don't live in Bozeman, for about 6 weeks now, at 8 o'clock every night, people go outside and howl in honor of the healthcare workers and grocery clerks and other people that are working to keep us safe.
Some of them even change into Dr. Werewolves for the night.
Yeah.
In the early morning.
Adult
For those of you who don't live in Bozeman, just to share some.
Speaking of someone who's talking now, we want to welcome Paul. He's going to be we're going to present a video that he did. But a little bit about Paul. He's originally from Venezuela. He started 406 Cirque, which is a hub of circus performing arts in the Bozeman area. He performed in our Stand by Snow in 2019, and he made this video for us having to do with Bozeman Creek. It's called, and help me pronounce it, Paul?
Aguitas Blancas.
Aguitas Blancas, or Little White Waters. Part 1, this is a part 1, it's called Boy in a Boat. The first vignette of this series, which is the one we're going to see, it's an invitation to dive into our childhood memories and submerge into the waters of our own unconscious. And I think for me, I have some really poignant memories of being near water when I was a kid. And this particular kid in the video has a relation with the creek, and it's a creek that comes into his dreams and it takes him on an adventure. It was written by Paul, camera and editing by Nathan Norby, and it stars Zeke Wolf from the Bozeman Cirque Troupe. So without further ado, here's Boy in Boat. great footage. So I happened to be out with my daughter and wife at Bogart Park, and I saw Powell and the performer in the video, Zeke, and his dad, and the water was just rushing by, and I'm watching them, and I was so surprised that you got Zeke into the water. Can you tell us a little bit about that day, Powell?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to start with you throwing me into the water, under the bus, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Well, I was also with half my body into the water because my role was to, beside directing, I was holding him with a rope so that the boat didn't go really like freely. So those are the secrets behind rolling. No, I just want to say, well, first of all, thank you, Didi, for your trust and for contacting me for doing this thing. I'm originally a performer, a stage performer. So I think speaking in behalf of performers worldwide, locally also, of course, I think it's been very challenging for us to keep doing our thing regardless of economic circumstances, just because of the fact that we are used to this very ancient thing of being face to face with people. So I took this gig as a challenge to work with the audiovisual format. That is something that has so much juice to it, and working with two of my biggest favorite themes, which are the inner child and meaning, and how the audience can project meaning if you are I don't know, smart enough, I'm gonna say, just to leave the messages half, but being still coherent in as you flow in creations. So I like that about my artist. That's something that I want to share about my artistic research, and I think this film it's a big invitation for that. Just the film is just there. You can just check it out later and share it with as many people as you want, and just dive in yourself.
So this is the first of a series. When can we possibly, if you know, expect the second vignette of the series?
Oh, that's coming up definitely soon when the water is gonna be warmer. But yeah, more details for sure to follow up. I guess in the next couple of weeks for sure we're gonna have a second one, and we're gonna keep following with more of these little vignettes
Great.
to give an homage to the creek. It's beautiful, this thing that Jim was saying about the creek going under the city. There's so much meaning to it. It's so beautiful. So definitely more inspiration from this gathering to collect and keep creating.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to see your work, and I can't wait to see you in person.
Man, me too.
Guys, we're just going to take a couple minutes for a break. We've got lots more coming up. We got storytellings of what old Bozeman used to be like when there was bridges across Main Street over the creek, and we've got music from Stuart Weber, and we've got all kinds of stuff. And so if you want to just take a couple minutes to refresh your beverage, and join us in a couple minutes. I'll see you then.
Right on.
I'm going to still be here. Yeah. So many people. Oh, it's getting cold there. Give it one more minute. You guys put some more ice in your old fashioned and crack open another beer and get your s'mores ready. Your fire's getting hot. All right, guys, if you're ready for more, then we're ready for more. Again, it's so nice to see all of your faces. It's been a long time for some of you. I hope it's not that much longer before we can sit elbow to elbow beside a fire, not 6 feet apart. Although I'll take what I can get at this point. Next up, we're really excited. Crystal is a great storyteller as well. I mean, just from what she has to say, her own stories, from what she's done, I've learned a lot. So Crystal Alegria is the director and co-founder of the Extreme History Project. It's a nonprofit that brings history to the public in fun, engaging, and relevant ways. She's collaborated with us on Bozeman Creek History of Hydrology walking tour for Mountain Time Arts 2017 Main Street Project, which was really a hit. She's going to tell us a few stories about the colorful history of Bozeman Creek. The creek has always run through the heart of downtown. Been witnessing our history, both good and bad, beautiful and ugly, since it's been here, and she's here to tell us a little bit about it. So, Crystal, if you would.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with all of you tonight, and thanks to Mountain Time Arts for inviting me. This is so exciting to be able to talk a little bit about the history of Bozeman Creek, because, of course, Bozeman Creek has so much history. And Bozeman Creek and the town of Bozeman really started right on the east end of Main Street, right where the heart of Bozeman is. And so Jamie's going to help me tonight. Jamie's going to put up some images, and she's going to start with a really cool historic image of Bozeman in 1867, kind of 1867, 1868, somewhere in there. And I hope she's going to put it up anyway.
Yep, got it.
Okay, cool. And we're going to kind of go back in time a little bit tonight, and we're going to talk about some of the creek's history. And wait for her to get my photo up here so I can talk a little bit about it. But Bozeman Creek has been used throughout time. Of course, Bozeman Creek was used for thousands and thousands of years by the indigenous people who have been here. And my story is a little closer to the present. I'm going to be talking about Bozeman Creek in the 1860s through about the 1880s. And so Bozeman Creek, like Jim said at the very beginning, ran right under Main Street, and still to this day runs right under Main Street. So this is a historic photo of Bozeman. This is Bozeman 1867, 1868, somewhere in there. It looks a little different than it does today, doesn't it? This is looking west. So the photographer was standing on a bridge that spans Bozeman Creek. And so if you were standing in this spot today, you would look left and you would see the Pecha pit you'd look right and you'd see bar 9. So that kind of puts you into the context of where we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to tell you a little story about how the creek was used in the past. Of course, it was used as recreation like we do today. People love to go and stand by Bozeman Creek, hear the creek, hear the birds chirping around the creek. People love to fish in Bozeman Creek. People always were fishing in Bozeman Creek. And in the 1880s, 1890s, people got a lot of trout out of Bozeman Creek. People used the creek for disposal, which hopefully we don't do that anymore today. They would throw their sewage into the creek, their garbage into the creek, but we have stopped that practice, I hope. But Bozeman Creek was also used for business, and many businesses were placed right on Bozeman Creek. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of those businesses today. And this was a business that was started by 2 men, and their names were Jacob Spieth and Charles Krug. And Jacob Spieth and Charles Krug came to America in the 1850s. They were from Germany. They immigrated to America, 1850s, and made their way west during the gold rush time frame. They came to Montana Territory in the 1860s, 1863, 1864, and they tried their hand at mining. And they didn't really take to it, as many people didn't, but they had a background in brewing. They were brewers from Germany, and they had worked in brewing businesses before. So they decided that they would come to Bozeman, settle here, right to the left of where this photo is taken, and they would start a brewing business. And they decided to do it right on Bozeman Creek because the creek had such special water. The water was sweet, it was tasted very good, and they knew they had to have their brewing business on the creek because they used the water, they used the refrigeration aspect of the creek during the summer. So that was key. So they built a 2-story wood frame building, and Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide, they built a 2-story frame building, this building right here. And on the bottom floor was a public hall or a saloon where people could go in and get a drink of the Spieth and Krug lager. And then upstairs, there was a place for lodgings where people could stay for the night. There was also a community space upstairs where they would have dances and lectures, and speakers would come in and talk to groups. So it was definitely a community place. The community really revolved around this building that Spieth and Krug owned. So business was booming for Spieth and Krug. They were doing great. And so in 1883, the railroad came through Bozeman. Finally, they had been waiting for it for a long time. And finally in 1883, the railroad came through Bozeman. And Spieth and Krug decided it would be a perfect opportunity to really build their business. So they tore down this wood frame building and they built a beautiful 2-story brick building. And Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide. And so brick really symbolized permanence. It really symbolized, you know, that you had made it, that you were successful. And so that's why they wanted to build this 2-story brick building. So if you look at the upper left corner of the slide, you'll see that 2-story brick building. It's beautiful. And it was kind of operated in the same way, a saloon on the bottom and then a public space on the top. And so this illustration is really an amazing illustration because it shows not only the front of the building on Main Street that you see on the top left up there, but it also shows the back of the building. So you'll see on this bottom part of the slide, you'll see the back of the Spieth and Krug area, their property, and you see that cone-shaped brick building. That was their malt house. And the building next to it, that wood frame building, was part of the buildings that they used, the outbuildings that they used for the brewery as well. And then you can see the creek going right next to all of those buildings. And you can even see a few ducks swimming in the creek, which I think is kind of cool. Jacob Spieth built his house right next to the brewery buildings. And so that's his house over there on the bottom right. And that would be, today, that would be on the corner of Babcock and Rouse. So if you can kind of visualize where that was. It's of course no longer there. It's a parking lot now. But this is the Spieth and Krug layout. And they had a big business here. But in the 1880s, things started to go downhill for Spieth and Krug. They made some bad investments, and costs of building this beautiful brick building kind of started to pile up. And so unfortunately, things were going bad for Spieth and Krug. And then in 1888, Charles Spieth suddenly died at the young age of 48 years old. He had a kidney problem. 1 week he was fine, the next week he was dead. So that left all the financial responsibility with Jacob Spieth. And he through his life had problems with depression. So this financial burden really kind of just pushed him over the edge, and he ended up committing suicide. One afternoon, he went down to the local pharmacy and bought a bottle of strychnine, went home, had dinner with the family. Later that evening, drank half the bottle and died almost immediately. So it's kind of a tragic, very tragic end for Spieth and Krug. The brewery, after Spieth's death, went to his widow, Barbara, and Barbara really had to keep it all together and keep it going. She kept it going for a couple more years, but she just couldn't do it. So she sold this building to Julius Lehrkind. And if anyone knows, has lived in Bozeman for any length of time, you've probably heard the name Julius Lehrkind. And Julius Lehrkind took this business, moved it to the north side of town, built a huge brewery, and the rest is history. So he really kept this business going. Barbara lived here the rest of her life. If you want to go to the next slide, Jamie. The next slide is actually the Spieth and Krug Brewery today. So this is the building that Spieth and Krug built in 1883, and it's still standing on Main Street today. And so if you go downtown, have a look at this building. It's beautiful. And you'll notice that the bricks are two different colors. The bricks on the bottom level are one color. The bricks on the second story are a different color. And that's because they were originally just going to build a one-story building, but then, like I said, business was booming, so they decided to go 2 stories, and they had to use a different kind of brick because they ran out of the first type of brick. So that's why it's 2 different colors. But anyway, if you want to go to the next slide, Jamie. This is the Spieth family. And of course, this is before Jacob Spieth passed away, but this is his large family of 4 boys and 1 little girl, and that's Barbara on the right-hand side. And so Barbara lived to the old age of 82 years old, dying in 1936. She finished raising her family here in Bozeman, and there's still Spieths that live in Bozeman today. So that's my stories. Next time you're down in Main Street, Bozeman, and have a chance to go and check out the creek, make sure you do that. And while you're there, raise a glass to Spieth and Krug. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, the Spieth and Krug.
Spieth and Krug.
Yeah.
They started the brewing business here.
Yeah, they couldn't find actual gold, so they made liquid gold.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you telling the story. It's funny, you see these buildings downtown so often that they become just sort of part of the landscape in the back of your head or your peripheral vision. And to hear the story that it's mired and very human, the good, the bad, the tragedy, the triumph. I love how now when I walk down the street, that story becomes part of my own story. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I love beer, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next up we have Karin Boyd. She's been working in the stream restoration world since 1988. She's professionally advised us here at Mountain Time Arts and collaborated on projects since 2017. She's going to help us to envision what a revitalized urban creek could be. So please welcome Karin Boyd to our campfire.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Karin Boyd. I've been in the stream restoration world since 1988, so I think that's few decades. And I'm delighted. Duncan Patton is on here. Linda Babcock is on here. People I've interacted in the water world for a long time. So it's good to see you guys. So first of all, Mountain Time Arts, I would just like to thank you guys for bringing kind of I'm a fluvial geomorphologist. Bringing me into the art world has been a really, I appreciate it. Being involved in Gabriel Ditch and Cherry River has been really a delight. So tonight, Jim and Dee Dee, thank you. They asked me to basically talk about a vision for Bozeman Creek, and I hope I come off being optimistic because it's hard. Urban stream work is hard. But what I've learned over the decades is that the vision isn't so much about what I normally do, which is optimizing disturbance and ecological function and all the systems that support an integrated, ecological system. It's really about creating joy for your community with all the constraints that it has. So I worked on the Bozeman Creek, the Bogart Park project for a while, and it was difficult because every time we tried to do something more and more creative, we'd run into a utility line, or we'd run into the band shell, or we'd run into the to the pavilion. And so there's just not a lot of room to work in. And so I've historically been a little bit skeptical about the bang for the buck, but what I've learned is that the joy that you bring with what you can do is immense. And I want to tell a couple quick stories. In 1990, I think, I worked for Interfluve here in Bozeman, and we had a project in Milwaukee. It was on the Menominee River, and it went right through the projects, right through the the Miller Brewery, and then the Menominee went into Lake Michigan, and our task was to remove concrete lining. It was like this total graffitied concrete line channel. And over the years, we removed it, and it was very intense because there was a lot of risk and constraints, et cetera. And we thought we did a good job. Well, about a year after the project, we got a call from the city of Milwaukee, and they said we were the toast of the town because people from the projects were catching salmon in the Menominee River. We reconnected about 17 miles of river to the lake, and some people were using shopping baskets and catching salmon. And it created this entirely different sort of social situation in this area where people were extremely proud to live by this river that they had never even paid any attention before prior to. Another one quick is last week I was talking to a friend who works for the Clark Fork Coalition, and we're restoring Silverbow Creek out of Butte, super fun project, and they were down on the creek. And an elderly gentleman who lives on Silverbow came down and grabbed my friend by the shoulders and started crying. And he said, thank you for what you've done. And so sometimes we get caught up in the constraints, but the opportunity is huge. And I think it's there for Bozeman Creek as well. So in terms of the vision, to me, it's all about connection. It's all about connectivity, both ecological and social. So the ecological connectivity is that it's like the pictures we just saw of historic Bozeman Creek, channelizing creeks and culverting them. It's all about efficiency. It's always about, we want to turn them from real creeks into basically conduits for water. And that's certainly the case in Bozeman Creek. So in the process, we disconnect the creek from its floodplain, and everything's too high, and you have no environments that are really creekside environments. And so if you look at the Bozeman Creek Bogart Park project, what you see is it's all about connectivity. There's a little side channel that I saw a couple days ago. It's about to, it might have flowed today. And it's all about creating these low surfaces, right? These little inset surfaces that you can actually have riparian plants get their feet wet and grow and create that typical creek environment. But the other thing is the social connectivity. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but during this whole COVID thing, I go out on the trails and kids are spending time. Normally people are riding bikes and walking the trails, and now people are looking to burn time, and kids are climbing trees and they're wading in the creek. And just like the movie we saw with this young boy getting in on his kayak and being able to dip his hand in the creek, that's another huge piece of this, is just to provide access. So in terms of restoring to a wild condition, it's just not going to happen. But in terms of restoring to a huge social amenity, can totally happen. The the thing I would say though is that it's hard because land values are high along creeks, but all I would try to impress upon all of us is that every single little bit of space we can give back to this creek matters. And that can be the parking lot where the house was that we just saw behind Nova Cafe. And it can be the other parking lots, you know, behind Bar 9 and City Hall. And it's hard to do, but the reward can be tremendous. So I hope we can all just kind of continue to chip away and try to give Bozeman Creek back incrementally what it used to have, which is connectivity to itself and some level of dynamics, and loosen it up a little bit, and thereby hopefully bring some joy to our community. So thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to give my little spin on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karin. What you guys done at Bogart is such a valuable thing for just the whole feeling of the place totally changed. And I just think that it's a great spark for the imagination of what the rest of that creek could be. And I just hope, regardless of the hard work, nothing good is ever easy. And I think that if we all put our minds to it and seeing what it can be, I think we can really do some really wonderful things along that creek. I would love to see a new bridge right across Main Street, right in front of the old brewery site, you know.
You know, Dalton, I was going to say that the gold star would be to daylight. There are communities around the country who've daylighted Golden, Colorado, you know, some in the east that would be phenomenal. That and the response that you see in these streams when you daylight them is incredible, mostly in the food chain, where macroinvertebrates that are now living in these slimy dark tunnels, suddenly you see different critters that feed on algae and things that feed other critters. So yeah, that would be sweet. We need to
Oh yeah, I'm gonna start holding signs up right there in front of the Eagles. Daylight the creek. Well, speaking of which, walking through Bogart the other day, we did another poll and we asked you guys how many times do you walk a water source during the summer, and we'd be really interested in knowing the results of that poll, what you guys gave your answers to. Jamie, could you share that with us?
Well, we haven't, I'm going to launch the poll, so everybody can answer now.
I got you. And now I know how it works.
Yeah.
I know mine is more than 4. I mean, come on. That seems to be everyone, pretty much. 14, 15. What's your favorite things to do by this thing? So think of that. Right. So we're going to open this up to discussion with you guys. This is going to be your opportunity to ask all our participants any questions that you might have, or comments, or any questions about Mountain Time Arts and what our future holds, or any ideas of how we can move forward with events that really enrich the community, but maybe aren't so large scale. So we're going to open it up to you guys, and please stick around afterwards. It's going to be about 10 minutes. Stuart Weber, the fantastic, ultra talented guitar player, musician, is going to play us a couple songs right after comment time. So if anyone has anything, you would want to unmute your microphone and share it with us all.
This is Jim, following up on what Karin said about the possibilities of revitalizing the creek. We've had 2 vision sessions around this project, one in February before, when we could actually get together. About 30 people came to that one, and we had another one in April via Zoom. So we're trying to polish up our Zoom skills. But one thing that's clear is that this is going to take a long time, but there's lots of kind of small scale opportunities of just, first of all, getting some, what I might call beacons or some kind of art pieces and interpretive things just at the bridges where the roads go across, just to help people notice that there is a creek there, and that even though it's fragmented and not, it's not going to ever be, I don't imagine, a continuous walkway, but raise the visibility and the aspiration that it is a potential place to visit and spend time with and connect from one piece to the next and become a cultural asset for downtown. I'm done talking for now.
Anyone else? I know you've got burning questions. The fire's getting hot.
This is Jamie. I'm just gonna share the links of the participants so you guys can follow them or their projects. So check the chat box if you are interested in that. And I'm done.
I want to give a shout out to Holly Hill with her 2 kids. That looks so cute. I don't know if they have any question or any comments. It's nice, you know, it brings like the kids dimension to the fire. So thank you for being here.
They're really enjoying how the hair moves on the people that have features in the backgrounds. and of course, the storytelling too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Did they bring the marshmallows?
Yeah, I hope so. Nice. Well, I got a question for Crystal or Karin, Karin. How long did it take to do the Bogart Creek portion?
Well, you might imagine we had a vision at the beginning that was pretty grand. So right below Story, we even tried to see if that alley was necessary, the little street that follows the creek right there on the east side of the creek. We thought, well, maybe we could get some room there, but it turned out that for garbage trucks that people use the alley. And so we kind of started with this big vision, and then it contracted with time. And then we learned where the utilities are, and there's a big utility line that runs from the pool kind of by the band shell. And so it took a while to figure out the boundaries of what we could work in. And that was a group we were all doing it as volunteers, essentially working with the National Park Service, a guy named Gary Weiner, some of you guys might have known, who was the real spearhead in doing all this. And that conceptualization probably took 6 months, but then we started working with landowners along the creek, and there was a really varied level of buy-in. Some people were worried that if you pulled the creek away from the edge on the west side, that it would be public land and there would be problems with people down there. So we worked a lot with meeting with the landowners and homeowners and getting their buy-in and coming into this collaborative solution that ultimately was built, which turned out great. But the entire thing probably took 1.5 years. I bet it took 1.5 years.
Wow. And how many people roughly would you say was involved with that? I mean, I know it's really hard.
Well, you know, there were river design people and engineers, and then revegetation people, and then also everybody coordinating the social aspect of it was enormous. And it just it was really terrific, though, to meet the homeowners along the creek and get their input. I think they did a really nice job of paying attention to input, you know, from people nearby who had people were celebrating, people had concerns, and putting that all together into a product that I think as far and bridge design. What a beautiful bridge we have there now that you see people hanging out on it all the time. Yeah, we ended up with a pretty great project.
Right. And I think just moving forward, I mean, now that the city has been introduced to this, I think you guys have done a lot for the future of it, because people can look at that and say, wow, like this is a tangible thing that we could have on our part of the creek, you know? So I think that public relations you've done a big part to help people visualize what it could be. So I thank you for that. Any
Well,
other
thanks.
questions?
And
Nope,
I
go
have a
ahead.
question. I have a question related for that. And Carson, this is kind of for you, because I think maybe an opportunity that, and part of this is on me because I wasn't really involved, but with the whole North Rouse MDT project that's going on, it seems like Bozeman Creek was a little bit of a hindrance or an afterthought in that whole project.
Yes.
I mean, do you think that there's going to be opportunity once that's done to piggyback on whatever's been done to enhance it?
I think so. And there are a few places that may become little small parks along the way there. And that might be the opportunity. You know, you have the small park where it does the 90-degree turn, and which is really, this time of year, it's a really exciting place to be, because water rushes down and you wonder whether it's going to flood the landowner that is immediately north of the creek. But it hasn't in quite a few years. But then it winds on down, and my recollection is there may be a place there where you could build a bench, and, you know, frankly, just sitting by a creek and looking at it is something really nice. And then, of course, is it still called Audrey's Pizza? That pizza place has outdoor seating right on the creek there as well. So there are some spots for it as it continues down. But there was a few valiant attempts to try and get MDT to do more, and the economics and otherwise of it made it difficult. Kind of in the same way that it was difficult to get people to let go of their vision of what might happen if the creek got changed around Bogart Park. And I'm hoping that as that evolves, because I love what you all did there. I think it worked really, really well. And as time goes on, there'll be other places and opportunities. And of course, it all then goes on down into Story Mill Park. So that's another opportunity to experience it in all of its glory.
Thanks for that, Carson. Any other questions, comments from anyone? If not,
this has been the biggest Zoom meeting that I have been, and the best behaved. I was teaching for elementary school kids, and then when you share your screen, I don't know how they do it, but they start scratching on the skin that on the screen that everybody's sharing. So I'm like, please don't. I found myself in this situation where I was like, please don't scratch on the board. So thank you everybody for being so well behaved from my inner teacher.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
thanks,
amazing.
Dalton. Way to go, man. Good
Oh
job.
yeah. Glad to be here.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well,
So many
guys,
dimensions, so many dimensions to the creek, you know, and so much input in this small gathering, you know, so beautiful gathering, really. So nice to see all these faces, and to know that people, there's not only people living in Bozeman, but people that is from abroad supporting this initiative and somehow transporting themselves into this experience. So it's part of it.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Guys, we're gonna move on now. Unfortunately, we only have a certain amount of time before you guys need to get to bed. Crawl into your sleeping bags in the tent around the creek. But so Stuart Weber is going to lead us out in a couple beautiful renditions of familiar songs that we all know. Stuart, just to tell you a little bit about him, he's a guitarist and composer. He credits the long, harsh winters of Montana for giving him time and space to develop as an artist. And along with the Denver Post, consider him a genuine Western original. So thank you so much for coming, Stuart.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. A pleasure to be here tonight.
Yeah.
There's so many people who love the water so much. I use the water in quite a few compositions of mine. And of course, the water that comes down through these streams that flow into the valley and then eventually out into the Missouri and past where the town that I was raised up in Great Falls. And further downstream from that is a great place in the river called the Missouri Breaks. It's a piece that I've written for that. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. I can see you clapping. Now, the thing about this water theme that we all look towards, and I do as a composer, is it places us in the land. It makes us part of a certain geographic area. We become really attached to it. And growing up in Montana, I just love how all the different streams, they all come together, they all flow out, and I just have such a relationship to that landscape that it's just hard not to want to compose music for that kind of thing. So I'll finish with this beautiful tune, and I'll bid you all farewell and hope that you all find some beautiful water to get next to this summer.
Yeah, Stuart. That's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Mountain Time Arts, we are so thankful for your support and for your time and attention, and we hope that you're hanging in there and that you're Zooming grandchildren and parents and grandparents, babies and nieces as much as you can. And look forward to getting back to seeing you whenever that may be. And enjoy your s'mores. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
That was
Thanks so
cool.
much for coming.
Thank
Thank-
you. Thanks.
Good night.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
Amazing, incredible.
We love you all.
That's Stuart. Oh my God.
Well, thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay creative, and stay engaged. And we'll look
Thanks,
forward to seeing everyone at a safe distance and closer the better soon. As we're lucky to live in a place where we can get outdoors and where we have good leadership from the governor to the city to the county health department, and we'll get through this, and we'll just open safely and take it day by day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for coordinating.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
See you on the creek.
See on the creek.
See Bozeman Creek.
The moon, the beautiful
The
moon.
moon, yeah.
There you go.
Where is that moon?
I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's coming.
It's incredible.
That was lovely.